It had snowed 6 consecutive days. The type of snow that descends like slow, quiet prayers. Heavy, soft flakes covering the prairie so that even the posts of the fence appeared like the skulls of ghosts. Wind grated tirelessly against the windows of Jedediah Boone's antique ranch house. But within, the fire continued to crackle in its hearth of stone, and the lantern flickered, dim, consistent, and loyal. Jed lit that same lantern each night, not out of habit but out of memory. Just as he still braided his horse's mane, or etched the names of long-dead cows onto the barn posts. All of it was part of a vow he'd made to someone now lying in the ground under the cottonwoods behind the house. That vow hadn't died with her. No one had come through his land for weeks. The trail had been buried under the drifts. Even the crows had departed. And then he saw them, 2 dark figures struggling through the snow, and his mind immediately leaped to wolves. And then one of them went down. The other caught her before she fell. They were human, barefoot, wrapped in torn deer hide and tattered shawls. Jed didn't shout, didn't budge, just stood there on the porch, the lantern next to him swaying in the breeze. The light danced in their big eyes. They said nothing, just stood at the edge of the barnyard, not knowing if they'd be invited in or shut out. Jed lifted a hand. It wasn't an invitation, but it wasn't a rejection either. Just a silent movement. Small. Still. Enough. The elder of the 2 girls nodded cautiously and pushed the younger girl ahead. He opened the creaking door of the barn. They entered. Jed lingered outside a little longer before the snow seeped through his boots while he looked into the darkness behind them, as though a third figure would emerge. Someone chasing them. Someone bad. But the prairie gave nothing in return. Nothing but wind, and a silence that seemed close to holy. The barn had an air thick with wet hide, smoke, and straw inside it. The girls stood close to the cow, who moved but did not complain. Jed did not say anything, just set down a tin cup of hot coffee against a wooden post and stepped away. He did not know if they could speak English. The older one reached for the cup. Her fingers were frozen with cold. A white scar sliced across her lower lip. Her eyes did not plead, they examined, judged. She did not thank him, but she did not spill the drink either. Turning to go, the younger one, a child, murmured something in an unfamiliar language. The older girl did not interpret. Inside the house, Jed left the door ajar. He didn't sleep that night. He simply sat in his rocker, staring into the fire, whittling an old cedar stick to splinters. Outside, the snow devoured every sound, but he could still hear that whisper in his brain. By morning, the girls were on his porch. He opened the door before they could knock. They stood there half-frozen, their heads bowed, their shoulders shaking. He just gestured towards the hearth. They entered. Hours passed before their hands quit shaking. Jed saw the younger one limped. The older girl eased her into the one chair there and sat on the floor in silence. Jed cooked some beans and handed them whatever bread he had. They ate slowly, thankfully, but with pride. Not desperately. He asked no questions. Another day went by. On the second morning, the child's fever broke at last. Jed put out a basin of warm water on the porch. By the time he came back from chopping wood, the older girl had already bathed her sister and dried the cloths. He stood in the doorway, arms folded, just observing. That was when she finally looked him straight in the eye, and it wasn't with terror. She sat up, walked across the room, and uttered her first word. "Chenoa," she said. Jed blinked, tried it again. "Jedediah." She said it correctly. Later, when he put a saddle on the mare to ride into town for supplies, Chenoa trailed him halfway to the gate. Snow had begun falling again, skimpy and lacy against the braid down her back. "Come back?" she said. Jed stared at her, impassive, unyielding, and nodded once. "I light the lantern every evening," she said. She cocked her head. "Why?" He said nothing. He just rode off into the snow. The general store was colder than the open prairie, not by degrees, but by the way people talked. Conversations hung suspended in the air, words cutting with suspicion. As Jed stepped past Clovis Hatch, the town blacksmith leaned in and muttered, "You know who they are?" Jed didn't reply. Clovis spat a thick glob onto the wooden floor. Comanche, I'd bet. Runaways or trade girls. Dangerous either way. Jed said nothing. He just paid for flour, salt, dried meat, and a small tin of cherry tobacco. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow. Expecting company, boon? Depends how long the snow lasts. Returning to the ranch, Chenoa again greeted him at the gate. She didn't inquire about the tobacco, but when she discovered it in the bag, she put it gently away in the cupboard, as though it were something sacred. That night, Jed walked out onto the porch and saw that something was different. The curtain within the main room had been fixed, not replaced, simply sewn back together again. Tight, clean stitches. The type of sewing someone who once knew comfort and desired it once more would do. He didn't say anything, simply left his deceased wife's old blue scarf draped upon the hook beside the door. Frayed, worn, warm. The following morning, Chenoa had it wrapped around her shoulders. She stirred the beans as Jed chopped wood. Tisa sat silently beside the fire, turning the pages of a worn-out old primer that Jed couldn't even recall possessing. The house was no longer hollow with silence. He caught himself hanging around the table, just to listen to the faint sound of breath that wasn't his. That evening, after Tisa slept, Chenoa walked outside. Snow whispered over the shingles. She stood bare-shouldered on the porch, allowing the flakes to kiss her skin, the blue scarf holding onto her like memory. Jed stood beside her in silence. "You quiet," she said. "So are you." She nodded. Then, after a moment, "This a safe place?" Jed breathed in. "It's not close to the world, but safer than most." She turned to him. "You alone, long time. 12 winters." Chenoa breathed out her misting breath. "I recall fire in our house. Deer stew on the hearth. Mother would sing." Her voice broke. Then Trey arrived. "Not deer. Girls." Jed did not blink. "My uncle traded us for bullets." Jed averted his head. "But you didn't ask," she said. "Didn't stare. I've seen too much to stare." She touched her fingertips lightly to his hand. "You think we stay?" He didn't respond, not in words. But again, that night, he left the door unfastened. 3 days had gone by. Then, on the 4th, the sheriff arrived. Jed was repairing a gatepost out near the fence when Chenoa appeared on the porch. Sheriff Arland Crowley wasn't cruel, but he was hard in all the ways a man of the frontier had to be. "Town's uneasy," he said, swinging down from his horse. "Word is you're harboring Comanche girls." Jed didn't blink. "They're not prisoners. They're guests." The sheriff looked up at Chenoa. "You claiming her?" Jed paused, then spoken, steady but firm. "I'm not turning her over to that. That's not what I said." The jaw of Jed grew stiff. "She's my wife." Crowley looked at him for a hard-to-measure space of time, then nodded once. "Then do it up proper, before Clovis gets smart." He headed off. Jed faced Chenoa. She stepped down from the porch step and stood before him. "Your law provides Mary?" "It does." She slowly unwrapped the blue scarf from her neck and offered it to him. "Then you give this to me again, like a gift." Jed accepted it in shaking hands, tied it softly around her neck. They didn't mention love, but in that instant, in that little holy action, love spoke for them. That evening, Jed lit the lantern just as he always did. But for the first time in decades, the light wasn't something he saw alone. Chenoa rested her head against his. Tisa slept under a quilt. And the wind, that same old lonely wind, no longer sounded like grief. It sounded like a hymn. If this tale awakens something deep within you, don't let it quietly pass. Tap the like button. Help others discover the light still alight. Undefined subscribe to ride further into stories of quiet redemption, lost love, and second chances under the broad western sky. Undefined, post your comments below. Have you ever left a light burning, anticipating someone's return? Undefined, and remember, sometimes the quietest stories leave the loudest echoes. There are more soulful frontier tales to come. Undefined, join the circle of firelight.